Hello and welcome to another Frackin' podcast.
I don't know what I'm
I'm
doing.
Nan and I'm here with my co-hosts.
I'm Marty.
I'm Joseph.
And if you're joining us for the first time, welcome. If you're tuning in again, thank you so much. We are so glad you are back. Today's episode is wow, I did not change the ridiculous name that I came up with in the script.
Shattered Mirror.
Shattered Mirror. Anyone want to know what I wrote in the script?
I do.
Archer should have gone to prison, not became the first president of the Federation. And we will be discussing morality in sci-fi shows. I stand by that. I stand by that. General content warning during this episode. We will be discussing episodes of science fiction shows that feature moral controversies. As such, we will be discussing topics and stating opinions that some people might disagree with and or be triggered by. So if you think that might be you, go ahead and skip this one. Also, Mom, Dad, here's your shout out. You're always waiting for it. So here's your shout out. We will be cussing. So sorry.
I will absolutely be fucking cussing. Sorry.
I watched all of these episodes in the last 24 hours, and I feel very fiery about some of these opinions. I'm very heated right now. So
this was your warning, Mom and Dad. That's all I'm saying. Yeah.
You know what I forgot to do? I'm not at my best today. I don't know why.
I know why.
That's okay, because these conversations are going to bring us to our worst.
Yes. It's fine. We're going to be at our worst anyways.
These episodes piss me off so much.
I'm divided because some of these episodes I think are some of the best episodes in science fiction ever.
Yes.
And on the same token, I hate them, but some of them I love.
So one of these is my favorite episode, period, of Deep Space Nine.
Yes.
It might even be my favorite episode of Star Trek of all time. And yet, shockingly, it brings up a lot of emotions.
It does.
I think that is why I like some of them, because they do make me emotional and they make me think. And thinking is not always a bad thing. So
I think you're right. That's exactly why these episodes are so good, is because they force you to confront your own ethics, your own moralities. And sometimes you're kind of like, ooh, am I wrong? Like, am I? Like, because I agreed with that person or I didn't. So I'm quite excited to see what everybody says on some of these topics.
I'm really excited about several of them. I will say before we get started that picking the episodes for this was like one of the hardest things, because in Star Trek, so many episodes would have been perfect, would have been absolutely perfect for this podcast. We have one from Babylon 5, and I only looked at the first season because Marty has only finished the first season. Yes, I'm calling you out, Marty. It's fine.
Sorry.
But I wanted to include it because there's so many good ones in Babylon 5. And yeah, we found a great one in season 1. So we have one from Battlestar Galactica, and I was talking about it with my brother, and he's like, what are you going to do? Just talk about the whole series?
That's the funny thing. When I was watching the Battlestar episode, I forgot exactly how literally every single episode of Battlestar Galactica is a moral or ethical dilemma. But I think that just so showcases like science fiction in general kind of is built on these problems.
It really is.
Yeah.
So picking episodes for this was a challenge, and I'm sure people who are listening to the episode will be like, well, what about this one? What about that one? And I'm like, listen, we could talk all day. We could, but there's not enough coffee. Actually, we couldn't talk all day.
I've been drinking so much coffee. Did you have 2 different mugs of coffee?
Well, this one's empty now, but yeah, I have 2 different mugs of coffee. My name is literally vanished coffee across social media. And I don't know why you're acting surprised.
I didn't get that until just now.
I just picked up on it. Hey, look.
Oh my god.
Thank God you don't write suspense and thriller detective novels.
I never would have figured out that twist.
I'm dying. I'm sorry. Okay, let's get started.
Let's start.
Wait, did you change the order? You changed the order on me.
I want to talk about Voyager.
Okay.
I put Voyager first.
We're starting with Voyager.
Start with the one that people will never agree on. And I think that's reasonable because I don't think that there is a perfect answer. Given the situation that they were in, I don't think that there is a perfect answer. You can say, well, Janeway should have done this. Well, this should have happened. Well, if they had been able to reverse it immediately, it never would have been an issue. I don't think there's a perfect answer. All that being said, Janeway was right. Janeway is always right. Janeway has never done a single wrong thing in her entire life. And is that because she adores coffee? Maybe.
She did one thing wrong. She did not immediately slap Chakotay when he started dating Seven of Nine. And that's the one thing she ever did wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. She did one thing wrong. One thing wrong.
Okay. So
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that I love this episode because I remember very distinctly the very first time I saw this episode. And I was much younger than I am now, and my opinion was very different than it is now. I had a very different opinion the first time I saw this episode than I do at this point in my life. But I was rewatching it this morning, and there is a line in the episode where they're talking about Tuvix having a voice, and Janeway says, yes, but Tuvok and Neelix also have a voice, but they're not here to speak their voice, and so I have to be their voice for them. And to me, that right there is the answer to this dilemma. Yeah. And I think that's the truth. I mean, both Tuvok and Neelix didn't have a choice in what happened to them. And we can argue the semantics of whether or not they could have done something with the transporter to save Tuvix or whatever. But at the end of the day, this is quite early in Voyager's journey. This is season 2, right? Yeah. So they still basically need all hands on deck. They need every person that they have. And I just don't think that Tuvix, as a single person, can fulfill the roles of both Tuvok and Neelix. Not to mention the fact that Tuvok has a family and Neelix had a family on Voyager. So I'm with Janeway on this one.
I will always be with Janeway on this one. Okay. And
I'm not abandoning you, but my child woke up early.
I strongly agree with what Janeway did. And it's not even for any reasons that are as moral as because Tuvok had a family, because they didn't have a voice. It's simply because Tuvix, I'm going to say it, I think Tuvix was a creepy fucker, and he just rubbed me the wrong way. He was a complete dick. They say that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and that is absolutely not true in this case. It's like every bit of selfishness from Tuvok that had been suppressed came out, and then it just Neelix's personality with a little Vulcan anger, so it just turned into like this thing that I hated absolutely. And so I'm just mad that she took so fucking long to get them separated. I know they had like technical like challenges to figure out, but like I wouldn't have let anybody sleep. I would have like thrown Tuvix into the brig and told engineering, you do not sleep until this fucker is separated.
Okay, I don't hate him that much.
I mean, I don't hate him that much either, but I think too, just from a command perspective, I think Janeway didn't really have a choice. I mean, after everything that happened with the Kazon and everything in the first season, she really has to lay down the law. She has to remind everybody that even though this is a Starfleet vessel and they're trying their best to follow Starfleet protocol, they are in a part of the universe that doesn't where it technically doesn't apply. It can't apply because of the situation they're in. And she needs Tuvok to get them home. She needs I don't think that Tuvix, honestly, I don't know that Tuvix would have stuck around. I feel like Tuvix might have just like they got to another planet where he thought my life could be better here. He might have just left them. And then they would have been out they would have been out Neelix and Tuvok. So I don't know. I think she had to it's one of those decisions, command decisions where she had to prove that she was in charge and that she could make these hard decisions.
Ooh.
I think another thing that a lot of people who argue that, Janeway was wrong forget is the concept of bodily autonomy. Like neither Neelix or Tuvok consented to this. So you are literally taking their body, their life, and using it in a way that they did not consent to. And there were a couple other Voyager episodes that I thought would be really interesting to talk about. And I can't remember the name of the episode, but they had lost a crew member. And then another species, how they procreated was they would take the dead of other species and then they would, that's how they procreated. And there was a lot of people on Voyager had a problem with that. Like
Yeah.
we didn't say that was okay. Like that's a
valor.
little weird. We don't like that. Yes. And I think this is even more egregious. Like they eventually were like, yeah, okay. This is your child now. Like we're accepting of this. We have to grieve our friend again. But this is more egregious because we're talking about two living people who are now one, which is not something that they would ever have consented to. I mean, Neelix is a very happy-go-lucky, go-with-the-flow kind of guy, but he's not going to be like, yeah, I would love to merge with the Vulcan on the ship. That sounds like fun.
You know what? I'm going to say this.
Oh no!
I think the reason Tuvix was so creepy and fought so hard is because Neelix did want to merge with that Vulcan.
Neelix does have a very strange relationship with Tuvok. I mean, even the opening of that episode, you can see Neelix does everything he can to try to get Tuvok to be his bestie. But
there's a little obsession going on there. Is all I'm saying. A little hyperfixation, and it was a little creepy.
This is not inaccurate.
I will
have to say, go ahead.
Sorry, it was like the episode where they found the Klingon bird of prey, and Neelix just decides to move into Tuvok's quarters. It was, I mean, I get it, they had to double up, but he did not respect space at all. It was look, Scott made a comment earlier that Neelix was a creepy fucker too, and yes, absolutely. I just kind of feel like all of the worst parts of them came out in this thing that was Tuvix. And to go back to this great comment.
Yeah, this is an interesting comment.
We
should read the comment. The comment is from Nita from the Sci-Fi Queens, and she says, was Tuvix really someone with rights? That's a question that needs to be asked. It took Data how long to get his rights, and how long did it take the Doctor to be recognized as a real person with rights?
So I think it's interesting because the rights of two others were taken away, as y'all have pointed out. Mm-hmm. But it was a biological life form. So, it's really hard to say. I think in the Federation, it would have been much harder to split them and more controversial because
I agree.
He was a living, breathing biological, whereas Data and the Doctor are artificial. Even though I consider them to be fully alive, they were artificial. So it would have been interesting to see how this would have played out in the Federation. Sadly, I think we would have been stuck with Tuvix.
And I think that's exactly why at the end of the episode they have the EMH refuse to participate, because I think in this instance, I think the doctor is representing the Federation. I think he represents what would have been done if they were in the Alpha Quadrant. And an interesting, we'll bring it up later for another episode discussion, but I think the doctor's choice here is to remind the viewers at home that this is the human perspective of what would be done, and not the perspective of somebody who maybe wasn't human.
Also, on kind of the same note, I think the doctor would have made a decision like very differently. I think he would have been okay with separating them in like season 5, maybe even season 4. As he got more autonomy, as he grew, he changed, and how he approached medicine changed. And there were some very like big episodes for him coming up in the next couple of seasons that affected him greatly, and how he developed empathy. I think he would have made a different decision just a couple seasons further on. So it is very interesting. Yeah, he made the very Federation decision at that point, but
it was the textbook decision.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's important to note that one of the episodes that you're talking about is probably the episode where he's in this like loop because he had to pick between Harry and like guest star X, right? And he picked Harry, of course. And so it's like, did I do this because Harry was my friend? And so you saw a lot of growth in that episode. And what actually takes him out of that loop is his empathy for Janeway when she's not feeling well, because she has spent so much time with him. So you're right. I think it would have been it would have been
a
quite
different
different
decision further into the series. But I think it is really important. And I think when we talk about our next episode, I'm going to circle back to the ending of this episode, because I think a slight change in the writing of the ending of this episode, and I think the viewers would all have agreed with Janeway. And I think we know where I'm going with this, but we should move on to our next episode that me and Marty are going to be so calm about.
This is when it gets spicy, folks. This is when it gets spicy. So this is the episode Similitude from Star Trek Enterprise. And this is the episode where Trip Tucker is in a coma and they need to replace his neural network.
Yeah. Because apparently Dr. Phlox didn't have enough animals he could just like mutilate in some way. I don't know.
He needed exactly the same neural patterns that Trip had at the moment of his death in order to basically bring him back to life and reanimate him. And in order to do that, you have to like genetically clone a child that's only going to live for 15 days, wait for them to age to that exact age, that exact moment, and then kill them. Oh, but wait, they didn't know that he was going to die. But they did. But they did, because they knew he was only going to live for 15 days.
Yes.
So that argument to me is like not an argument.
Well, okay. So I'm going to do one bit of defense for the doctor, right? For Phlox, in that he did not know that this clone would have all of Trip's memories. And I think it would have been a different decision if he had known that. But
I think if he'd known that, he never would have suggested it. And I think it was the suggestion at all was dangerous on his part, because I feel like the Phlox's species is farther advanced than humans at this point. He should have known that like the humans were going to choose like the unethical option here.
Yeah. I feel we are enough seasons in that Phlox knew what Archer was going to choose when he proposed it. Sure, he did not know that Sim was going to get Trip's memories. And he did not know that they would have to actually kill Sim instead of letting him live out his 15-day life cycle. But this brings up so many fun questions about cloning, because humans keep talking about how, oh, we could just clone ourselves so we have like spare organs. Um, this person needs a new kidney. Why don't we just, have a clone kidney? Um, this is essentially that in space. So
no, sorry, go ahead. Finish.
Go ahead. I'm angry and I'm about ready to say something mean.
Okay, so I think the goal when we talk about cloning is to clone just the parts.
Yeah.
And what you bring up is along the lines of what Sci-Fi Queens is saying, right?
This is the the island with Ewan McGregor. What they've done here.
Correct.
Yeah.
Which is horrendous because I would never be okay cloning an entire organism for parts and then butchering that organism, that person, right? That clone, that person. And I cannot believe that Archer's like, well, I need Trip. I need Trip. You have an entire ship of qualified people. Are you telling me that your single point of failure is this one engineer? Like, I know he's your best friend, etc., but you're going to do something horrendously immoral? And it's not because somebody else can't step up. It's because you just want your bestie and you are a terrible human being.
Well, yeah.
But
can we talk about like how Trip is out of commission? So like T'Pol is running point in engineering.
So they don't need him. Right? They don't need him.
It's just so it's wild to me that anytime anyone has like a problem where they can't do their position, they just stick T'Pol in it. Like she can just do literally anything. And I'm like, this is the smartest being in creation, apparently, because she is so good at absolutely everything. Just
well,
like, my biggest issue with this episode. Well, I have two big issues with this episode. The first issue that I have is that, to me, the circumstances of this episode undermine so much character development that was built for the characters. And at this point, when I watch this episode, I end up hating everybody. I hate Phlox. I hate Archer. I hate T'Pol. The only people in this episode the only person, I'll say person, because it's the only other character that gets even a spoken line, I think, in this episode, is Malcolm. He's the only character that I feel like was kind of standoffish, felt kind of like maybe this wasn't right. He kind of didn't involve himself. So negative points there. But like, he obviously had a problem with this. Whereas everybody else was kind of like, yeah, we have a problem with it, but we're going to do it anyway. And then my second bone of contention with this episode is that the way they ended it basically frees everybody from their problem. It basically gives them a free pass. They're forgiven. You're forgiven. I do this. Because Sim decides to just do it.
Does Sim decide though? I mean, I don't think he decides, because
I think he knows they're going to force him. I think he knows they're going to force him regardless. And I think he just says he's going to do it because to save them having to live with that. So he's the better person than everybody.
He's basically sparing Archer's feelings. That's the only reason.
Because he knows he's Archer's best friend. He has those memories too.
Yeah.
Which is Archer never should have been in charge of this decision. He should have had to step aside, even though he's captain. He should have had to step aside because he's too close to it. This should have been a decision made by T'Pol.
Archer should never have been in charge. You should stop right there. Stop right there.
Okay, so we do reach a point where Sim finds out that because he was told from an early age his entire purpose. Like, that's not traumatizing for a small child. His entire purpose is to give little brain chemicals at just the right age, and he's only going to live 15 days. Like, they are so open about this. Like, fuck you, Archer. That's kind of awful to tell a kid, but whatever. And then they realize, oh, actually, we made a mistake. We're going to have to kill him too.
Yeah, you get to live for 9 days or whatever instead.
And Sim is like, you're really gonna kill me? And Archer's like in
Yeah.
his face,
That scene was
literally comes
rough.
out and says, I will kill you for a Trip.
I
Okay.
need Trip.
I will do it. I
Yeah.
need Trip. But he's not demonized the same way that Janeway is when she makes a different decision to save two people, whereas he's literally killing one person to save one person when
Yeah.
they have the possibility of extending Sim's life.
And I feel like the part that makes me mad is that he's not demonized. One, probably because he's a male captain. You know, just get that out of there. Janeway was a woman, and so people are going to demonize her for that. But also, he's not demonized because in the end, it's Sim who, quote unquote, willingly lets him do it. Whereas Tuvix was like literally kicking and screaming, like his way down the turbo lift. So
how differently would people approach the Voyager episode if Tuvix had been given 5 more minutes to think it through the same way that Sim did? Because Sim fought, kicking and screaming and running away to a shuttlecraft, and he got all the way there and he thought it all the way through, and he knew at best he had a couple of days first off, so that was bad for him. But that was if they even let him leave. Like, they would probably try and track him down because they really wanted Trip. So I don't think he chose to come back. I think he knew that he didn't have a choice, and he chose to go quietly and calmly. And for me, I read a really good book. It was about some of the last witch trials in Germany, and I can't remember the title of the book, but it was really, really good. But in this book, they discuss that people weren't really dragged to their executions because people had already accepted it and was thought of as a really, really good thing to walk calmly and to like lay their head down calmly. Like, this is a thing you see in medieval executions all the time, is these people accept it and they go. And it's not like, hey, yeah, I want to get executed, but you're taking control of what you can take control of. So like, it makes me so uncomfortable because he's not choosing. He's not.
It was not a
doesn't
choice.
have a choice.
And honestly, from a writing perspective, from a writing perspective, it would have been way more interesting if when Phlox came forward with the enzyme at the last minute, that Hail Mary pass, if that was something he could have done, like in a legitimately quick, like in a quick time frame, and then we actually did see a Sim replace Trip on the crew. I think that would have been a very interesting storyline to have followed through.
I love that
because
I want it.
Although my other big issue with this episode is that basically it's the jumping off point for Trip and T'Pol. And
in the creepiest way.
It is creepy because, she starts the episode off holding him as a baby, and like, she's like playing mother to him in a way. And then she's kissing him by the end of the episode. I mean, it's like
she's kissing him knowing that he's about to die.
Exactly.
And she is absolved from actually having to like deal with her feelings with Trip.
Exactly. And that bothers me because then from this moment on, we've basically sealed that they're going to be in a relationship. But what is their relationship actually based on? Is their relationship based on this relationship she had with Sim? Because that's messed up.
It's so
cool. Oh my god, I never thought about it that way. That is really messed up.
This is why I have such a problem with the Trip T'Pol relationship. Because I feel like this episode undermines the entire thing.
So
okay, I'm not mad
in
at
the first couple seasons of Enterprise, we have the decontamination chamber, which is fun.
Yeah, but she's in the decontamination chamber with Hoshi and Archer and Trip. It's not just Trip the whole time.
I know, but then we get to this point in the series and they're like, okay, we maybe overplay that a little bit. Let's just have Trip and T'Pol like half naked rubbing on each other and calling it like medicine. Like, this is therapy time. This is just nerve therapy. It's fine.
Again,
there's so much about this series.
Creeped out.
Again, from a writing perspective, how much more dramatic would it have been if after this episode, T'Pol took a step back and said, like, Trip, I can't. We can't. I mean, it would have been hard for viewers who really liked them together, but I think it would have made their relationship much more interesting.
Yeah.
Much more interesting.
But Rick Berman couldn't possibly have depth to a relationship between two people. I'm sorry, this is always going, like, I will always be a Rick Berman hate
between two straight people.
Accounts.
Oh,
between
yeah.
two straight people, correct.
Yes.
So I need to bring up, this episode highlights the fact that Rick Berman's an asshole because, like you said, T'Pol's running engineering, got no credit for it. Janeway gets criticized for her decision. Archer's like a hero for his. Why? And to quote Morgan, misogyny in space. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. That's
yeah.
all that brings up.
I mean, it's true. That's why I hate this episode, because it undermines Archer as a person and as a captain. Like, it proves that he can't make command decisions. He's blinded by his friendship. I mean, they are in a moment where, like, every minute counts. Like, Earth is about to be destroyed. Like, they're stuck in this stupid, weird, like, cruddy stuff is on the walls, field. Like, it undermines him. It undermines T'Pol's ability to... First of all, it undermines T'Pol's morality.
It does.
And her logic, her rationality. And I don't care. And it doesn't work for me that we later find out that she's infected with something that's causing her to, like, not be like whatever, you know. That doesn't work for me.
Oh, that entire storyline.
And it undermines Phlox's intelligence to me as well. I can't believe that this is the only episode where I'm on Malcolm Reed's side. Like, what? Who am I?
Malcolm's my boy. Malcolm's my boy. He's the one I relate to the most. I love and adore him. Okay.
I do like him.
I do like him. The more I watch Enterprise, the more I like Malcolm Reed. I don't know what that says.
I think most of the characters in this show got underutilized, and that is really sad because I think we could have had so many amazing stories.
I mean, Hoshi,
Porthos, even Porthos thought it was a bad decision, because remember, right before, he's lying. Porthos stays with Sim the whole time. During this episode, Porthos is always with Sim. Porthos is always in Sim's bunk. He's with him the whole time. Porthos knows this is the wrong thing to do.
Yeah.
Arthur doesn't even listen to his dog.
No, of course he doesn't. He's a bad pet parent. Okay.
So I have one issue.
Just one?
With what you said.
Oh no.
And look, Marty, I love you, but
oh no.
This is not the episode that highlights Archer as a bad captain. I think that was like season 1, episode 1.
Yeah, that's so. Well, okay.
it highlighted it for you because you are a nice, forgiving human.
Just I'm such a big Quantum Leap fan. I just want to give Scott Bakula the benefit of the doubt.
To Nita's point here, had Archer been a woman or person of color, he would have been viewed as a horrible captain.
Oh, without a doubt.
Which is interesting because remember how Archer wasn't first up for this job. It was the woman captain, and if she had
nepo baby.
Oh my God, he is a nepo baby.
He is a nepo baby.
I forgot.
He's not
my dad's engine. My dad's engine.
No, he never shuts up about his dad's engine.
Why aren't you the engineer?
The reason he's here. Like, okay, nepo baby, we know you're a nepo baby. Shut up and do your job.
Oh my God, but are they all Starfleet nepo babies? Hold on, because Kirk then is a nepo baby. Picard's dad was in Starfleet.
No, he was a.
Cisco was not. Cisco was not a.
Cisco was not.
Pike, we don't know. I don't think so, because Pike doesn't have a relationship with his parents, so not. I'm going to say not. Janeway.
Janeway's dad was in Starfleet.
Janeway's dad was in.
Well, that's right. He was
not a captain.
He was an admiral. That means he was.
Oh, Archer.
I think a lot of Starfleet is based on military and military families, and so like just because your dad was in the military does not actually make you a nepo baby when you join the military. So I'm gonna give him a slight pass on that, but like Archer is absolutely definitely only there because his dad built the engine.
That's true. Yeah.
That's the only reason. He is not the most qualified at all.
And you know, I'm 100% with you on the engineering thing, because you're basically saying that one person make sure that that whole department runs and works at all times, and that nobody else could ever possibly fill Trip's shoes in the event of him
It's
dying.
simply because of this. T'Pol is by nature collaborative because she has no ego about her own abilities. She just does what has to be done. Archer likes the fact that Trip is his little like control freak, right? His little micromanager in engineering. And this is what Archer wants. Is somebody he knows is going to micromanage in his style. That's all I see from it. Everybody else in that department knew what they were doing. You cannot tell me it's just this one guy who has.
No, you're right.
You can't tell me. There's no way.
Yeah.
So since we're talking about relationships that I think make more sense than Trip and T'Pol, Trip and Archer, those are definitely bros. Those are boyfriends.
They're not bros. They want to be like way
I'm
more
just
than bros.
saying. I'm just saying.
I would have respected it more if they had just
Look, write the
come out.
fanfic. Convince me. Convince me.
I
Oh.
will not be
Send me the
writing a single
Send me the
fanfic
fanfic.
about Archer where he is not dying brutally. I'm sorry.
I know.
he can
I
die
know what I'm
brutally
doing.
at the
I'm
end.
not mature enough for that.
I
can't
know what
do
I'm
it.
doing for the rest of the weekend. No, I'm just kidding.
Please send it to me. Please send it to me. Let's move on before we start.
Yeah.
We've
Okay.
taken a lot of
Next
time.
episode.
This is Battlestar Galactica Black Market. I did say previously in this episode that I had a really hard time picking a Battlestar Galactica episode because it was just like, yeah, this one and this one and this one and this one. And what about this one? Like, there are so many good ones. But the Black Market, I think it poses different questions than a lot of the other episodes that we are talking about. So, like, I tried to get a more varied mix of episodes to talk about. This one makes me so uncomfortable, but at the same time, the conclusion, what Adama does at the end, like the decisions that are made, he's right. And the president tries to argue about it, but like she is too often certain that humans are just good. And I'm really glad she does have people around her that are like, actually, actually, we're kind of not great. Okay, we're kind of not great.
She definitely operates on this level that she believes everybody in the fleet is going to do what is best for everybody in the fleet. When in actuality, the majority of the fleet is going to do what's best for them so that they can survive individually. And I think on one hand, that's what makes her a good president at the beginning of the series, but also that is also her failing as the president of the fleet, because
I
she
think
needs those advisors.
Mistakes as president are because she too blindly believes in faith. And I know that is just like a central aspect of her character is her faith. Her faith in the prophecy, her faith in, you know, humans being decent. This episode though,
I just think that like, so what there's a lot of different things going on in this episode.
Yes.
And it's hard to talk about all of them because Battlestar Galactica is such a like continuous storyline. But if we're looking at just the Black Market issue of whether or not there should be one or not, I think in this situation, like normally I would say like it's not good for the majority of the people. But in this situation, I think that Lee is right. I think that having it, but knowing who's involved, so at least you have control of knowing who it is in case something does go wrong or something does happen, it's better than like the enemy you don't know sort of thing.
Yes. I had an interesting conversation with a friend years ago when I was bartending. And they are from a country in Eastern Europe where it's very common to like you get pulled over by a cop. You just like pay off the cop and you get to go. And people would call that corruption. And she looked at us. It's like, okay, so it's corrupt for me to pay $50 to a cop who's then going to use that for his family, but it's okay for you to go and pay $250 to a court where that money goes straight into the pockets of the government, and then it's like utilized for shady purposes and pocketed illegally. That's not corruption. And it's like, I kind of just stood back because I'm like, whoa, okay. So like this entire structure that BSG that the president was like depending on, like the morality of people, it really is based so much on the fact that we are as a society used to following this like this artificial order, and we don't even think it's like, oh well, it's going to an official source, so it must be okay. Like not necessarily. So I kind of love this episode because it really throws it into the face of the viewers that, hey, you know what? You may think society is perfect and clean and whatever, or at least at the time we thought that. Not so much anymore. But these things exist even in the United States, and you don't think they do. You're just naive.
Yeah. I mean, that scene where where Leah's talking to the at the time the head of the black market, and they basically pan the camera to all the kids in that cell. It has to be one of the most, I don't even know. I remember the first time I saw that, I didn't know that I saw it, but I was like, did I really just see what I saw? You know? Because, and that's why Battlestar Galactica is so good. It's such a commentary on real life.
It is. I mean, it's no shock that the showrunner of Battlestar Galactica was the showrunner of Deep Space Nine. I mean,
yeah,
he loves to dive into these themes that are so relevant. Even it doesn't matter what point in history you're watching the show, right? Like it was relevant then. It's so relevant now. It's almost scary, which is why I love that series. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, I like this comment too. Oops.
I think we both hit it at the same
we both
time.
hit at the same time. I like this comment because that sometimes organized crime, black market supports a different layer of society and is important. And I think that's true because, like you said, not only are we as people used to this like hierarchical structure protecting us, quote unquote, but we're also used to like looking at our world from an individual perspective. And people, no matter what, are always going to strive to get something that they want or get something that they need. And no matter what, nobody on in this fleet was ever going to be equal. There was always going to be some people who were higher up, either because of their military rank or just because of their life before leaving the planets.
Or there were always going to they just happen to be on.
Yeah. And then there are always people who are going to be subjugated. And so there's always going to be a driving need for things. And in that case, yeah, it makes sense that they had some kind of black market. Because if they went through and just got rid of the black market, what would happen? There'd be a revolt, there'd be a rebellion, because then there would be other problems. And they can't afford to have deaths, right?
No. The black market is very important to the continuation of the fleet. And it is fascinating to watch Lee go through his process of accepting that. Because at the beginning of the episode, he very clearly is like, oh, no, I'm in charge of this investigation. We're shutting this down. This is done. This is over. And then we get him at the end being like, actually, you're right. This is necessary. I understand why it's necessary. And they gave him a whole emotional subplot that helped him reach this conclusion. But I do like that he comes down and says, here are the rules.
Yeah.
We're going to pretend that you're not here, but we're going to keep track of you, and you don't get to do these things that I personally find too terrible for you to do.
Yeah.
You guys are necessary. But this over here, this is the line.
And that there's always a line.
There's always a line, but I like that he's like, okay, yeah, you guys stay, but you guys follow my rules, and I'll just pretend you don't exist.
I think what this episode hits a lot of feels for me, because a lot of the people in the fleet are refugees. Flat out. Anybody who's not on Battlestar Galactica is a refugee. Or a captain of their ship, right? And crew of the ship that they happen to be on. But even then, they're still kind of refugees. And even in immigrant families, like, if you need an antibiotic, you may not have access to health insurance or whatever. So you go to a flea market or something and you get, foreign branded in Spanish antibiotics that work just as well, and when you need it. Like, this really kind of highlights that entire thing. Like, there are a lot of people in that fleet who were probably doctors and lawyers, and are suddenly like penniless and thrown into a ship where they have no skills that are of any use whatsoever. Maybe a doctor would have one, but a lawyer has no use there. And they're struggling to suddenly find the resources that they need to survive and not be at the complete bottom. I love this episode in so many ways.
I just love this
so
show.
Good. This show is good. We all know that I love this show.
Yeah.
We
do, so really? Good. I never would have guessed.
Did you like this show?
Really?
What? No, I don't like this show. Nothing about this show.
I just like that Battlestar Galactica doesn't hold its punches. It hits you with a moral and ethical dilemma almost every episode. One that you can correlate to your real life. A lot of people have seen in their real lives. And then they play them out, and sometimes you get a good ending like this one, and sometimes you don't.
Accurate. I do like in this show that we don't always get the happy ending. Star Trek is known for being, very, very optimistic. And we do get some like endings in Star Trek episodes that are not like bright and fluffy and all the problems are solved at the end. But for the most part, it has a much brighter outlook. And Battlestar Galactica is actually like,
it's the anti-Star Trek.
Guess what? We're gonna make it worse. It started bad. We're gonna end the episode even worse. This is a horrible thing that we're gonna discuss. But here, let's actually just make you feel worse about it. That
show's just so amazing for that.
It does a really good job of making you think and making you question. So yeah, finding one episode to talk about from Battlestar Galactica is very, very difficult, especially because they're so interwoven. But also because, it's just all of them would have made amazing discussion for this podcast. Just so good.
Okay, let's move on to the next topic.
Oh, okay. Yes. This is Babylon 5 Believers. We went with an episode in the first season because I'm going to bring it up again. Marty has not finished the show.
Sorry.
You don't even know about my favorite Ranger.
I'm working on it. I have to say though, rewatching this episode did make me want to go back and start watching again, because I did like this episode for its setup. Although I'm interested to see what everybody says about this episode, because I don't know.
I was really excited when I asked how far you had gotten, because I had recently rewatched this episode and I was like, this one would actually be really good. And I think Marty made it this far in, so we can use this one. And this one is different than the other episodes we have. This one is for anyone who has not seen Babylon 5, go watch Babylon 5. I don't know what you're doing with your life, Marty.
They're doing whatever I'm doing.
We have an alien species. We have a couple that comes with their child to Babylon 5 looking for medical care for their child. They are very, very religious. And Dr. Franklin has the ability to heal their child, make their child completely well again. However, it requires surgery. And their religious beliefs say that if you perform surgery on them, then their spirit leaves and they're just like an empty husk. So they are like, you have to find a different way or we have to leave because this is, you can't do that. This creates problems for Franklin because he's like, no, I can save this kid. I can save this kid. So the entire episode is this family running around and Franklin running around trying to talk to everybody to convince them that they are the morally correct decision. And you get to see it. And I love how they did this. You get to see it from so many different perspectives. You get to see it from the commander of the ship, not the ship, the space station. He contacts home and is like, hey, Earth, what should we do in this decision? And Earth is like, not my problem. Figure it out. Not my problem.
Yeah.
The couple goes to every main ambassador to like plead their case, like intercede for us.
That was one of the best scenes. Seeing the mom and dad going to every single ambassador and being like, will you represent us? Will you speak on our behalf? And then hearing the reasons why they wouldn't was very interesting.
Species had a different reason for saying no.
And even if they agreed with them, they were like, yeah, we're on your side, but we can't take sides on this this matter. Yeah, I thought that was very interesting.
It was... Go ahead.
What I love about B5 is just all the political intrigue and how it highlights how fragile a society can be when you are having to get some sort of consensus from all of these differing like agendas and parties. This episode, it leaves me confused because I actually didn't know what side to fall on. And towards the end, I was like supporting the family despite my own misgivings about what I knew was about to happen. So it's just messed up.
This episode was interesting because as somebody who went to medical school and had to like go through this do no harm discussions, I was struggling at the first half of the episode because the first half of the episode I was like, the boy seemed to want to get better. This boy seemed to want to have this procedure done. But then at the moment that the boy said no, the moment that the boy said, I do not want to have this procedure done, I believe that this procedure will cause my soul to leave my body. It's against my religion. At that moment, I was on the parent's side. At that moment, I'm like, I'm on the side of the patient. I have to... At that point, I was like, Dr. Franklin is wrong. He's right that he can save the boy, but he's wrong about saving the boy. Because once the boy said no, I was like, no.
Yeah.
And it would have been more conflicting to me if it had been opposite. If the parents had said, we want it done, and the boy said no, then I would have really struggled. Because if the parents were like, we're your legal guardians, we want you to have this done, you're going to have this done, but the boy truly believed that he was going to lose his soul if he had this, then I would be more conflicted. Yeah. But of course, human bias, right? Like our system of morality bias, because you see all these other characters from different worlds basically giving their opinions on what they would do based on their situation.
And there's no prime directive here.
No, but I think ultimately for me, Franklin was ultimately wrong in what he chose to do, and he suffered the consequences for what he did. in the end, in a way.
I think
Not as much as
I
the
think
Not as much as the boy, obviously, but
Yeah.
like, I mean, how traumatized, but he opened up that path for that. He didn't know the culture well enough. He should have taken time to have understood the culture. And I
It's
recognize that there was like speed was of the essence,
yeah.
but like if you don't understand the religion or the culture of the people, then you can't. You opened up that door. It's Pandora's box.
so
I
this
think
this
this was a really good a really horrible lesson, but a very good lesson for Franklin. He talked all the time about how he, before coming to Babylon 5, like he would just sign up to be a doctor on a ship. And that's really how he learned a lot about alien biology and anatomy, was just like on the job, jumping around from ship to ship, playing doctor, which good for him. Love that for him. But this really gave him a lesson, and he had to learn to step back and be more conscious of different alien races and religions, because he did this from a very human perspective, like a very, very human perspective. And you can't work with all these different aliens that you have on Babylon 5 and be like, no, we're going to approach all of my decisions from a human perspective. Like,
I like the philosophical question it proposes too. I can't remember which character it was towards the end, but somebody brought up, well, how do you know that their faith isn't correct? Like you don't believe this because you believe that if you cut into a body, the soul still remains intact. Like he believes that. Franklin believes that. But how does he know for certain that cutting into this person who is not human, that won't cause his soul to leave his body? Like he doesn't know that. And so that for me was a very interesting part of the twist, because the truth is like that is an alien species. He doesn't know, because it's very clear from the beginning he doesn't know the species well enough, because he doesn't know their culture or anything. That he doesn't know what will happen if he cuts into the boy.
yeah, if one's right, maybe they're all right.
Right?
It was
That was a good line. That was a great line.
It was a great line. It's a very timely episode at the time, because this was like in the 90s, and I have a good memory about random facts, right? When I'm old. So at the time, there was like in the news a controversy about like a family of Christian Scientists who did not want their kid to get treatment. And it was like on 2020 and like all these news sources. And I just remember there being interviews. It's like, okay, everybody was kind of mocking the Christian Scientists. But then there was like, I can't remember if it was 2020 or another, or 60 Minutes, but they were interviewing like this sect of Buddhism where they are like, we can do no harm. And that even means surgery. Like you cannot cut into anything that's alive.
Yeah.
And it gave this different perspective. It's like, just because we think this is silly because this is like a more modern, recent American, like whatever, there are legitimate other cultures who have very strong beliefs about certain things. And I love how this show, and especially this episode, highlighted that so well. And it was timely, but also timeless, because we still have these conversations, right? Like, I'm going to bring up the fact that, we had the pandemic, and there are a lot of people who are like, well, I'm not going to take that because I don't believe that XYZ. And I, as a man of science, will always disagree with them, because I think they were basing their stuff on silliness. But there are groups, religions out there who probably did not want that, because you are not cutting, but you're penetrating the skin. And that, in some aspects of Buddhism, you can't do. So it's interesting to me.
I think it's an important lesson too, in the idea that Franklin, as a physician, as a doctor, his care does not just extend to his patient in the moment. His care needs to extend to his patient after the surgery. And if the quality of this child's life is not going to be equal or better than it was before the surgery, then is he actually helping the boy? And clearly in this culture that this boy is from, in this race, he would have a horrible quality of life. Imagine that the parents didn't do what they did at the end. Imagine that they did go take the child and went back. People would know. People would find out. The boy would probably have been ostracized. Yeah, he would be cast out of society. So I mean, and then he'd be forced to move away, live someplace else, away from his people, away from his culture, away from his religion. And is that a quality of life for the boy? Is that worse? Is that better or worse than him dying from this illness that he has?
Yeah. Also,
great.
Before we move on, the subplot of this episode is Ivanova being badass, which she is in every episode. I swear every single line that they gave this woman is just like quotable. Everything she says. But she has a very similar story. She is out in her little fighter, fighting raiders and escorting a ship back. And she makes a judgment call and breaks protocol and does something that she is not allowed to do, just like Franklin. And in her case, it works out and everything's fine. And people are like, oh, good job. Good job.
Mm-hmm.
Franklin made a different decision, obviously, but a decision that is like controlling one life, whereas she made one controlling a whole transport vessel. And his decision is like, no, that was wrong. You made the wrong decision, Franklin. So it's a really funny scene when Ivanova gets back and Garibaldi's there and she's like all high on adrenaline and is like all excited, but everyone else is like, this has been fucking shit while you were gone. And Garibaldi's like, don't worry, I'll explain it to you. But we have these two storylines happening at the same time, and they're very, very similar. And the outcome is they both make the same decision, which is to not follow the rules. And one is rewarded and one is punished. And I love Babylon 5 for this kind of writing, because yes, the entire time we're questioning this medical decision, the religious implications, and you can feel however you want about that, but at the end they're like, actually, up. Sometimes you make a decision and break a rule and you get rewarded. So
the nuance there is so amazing.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm gonna always bring it up, right? Like J. Michael Straczynski pitched this idea to Paramount, and we got Deep Space Nine. So at the end of the day, we have J. Michael Straczynski to thank for Deep Space Nine and Babylon 5, or Battlestar Galactica. Sorry. I'm just gonna always throw that out there. How related these shows are.
They are very similar in some ways. I do feel like, and you can see this sometimes with two authors who are friends, and they definitely have a discussion and they talk about something, and then they go to like their separate corners and write books, and you can tell when the books come out that they had a discussion at some point, because like there are ideas in both stories that are so similar, but they took it in completely different directions. And that's what I think of when I think of Deep Space Nine and Babylon 5. Like they were both given this little chunk, this little nugget, and they were both like, you know what, I'm gonna spin this way and I'm gonna spin that way, and it's absolutely fascinating. I love it.
And we got so much amazing content out of it. Like the fact that these shows did not win the awards they should have won. Constantly bothers me.
They're
like
both
the writing
very timeless.
Yeah. Cough Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. Yes. 100% yes.
Obviously.
Yes.
So much yes. That was what I was thinking. Okay, are we moving on to the next one?
Yeah.
Next one. The other
Surprise! It's not Odo.
Surprise! It's not Odo. It is cloning again, though.
We're back in cloning. This is from Stargate SG-1. We have a couple Stargate episodes to discuss.
The other side.
Finally. This episode was brilliant. This is a brilliant episode.
Can we talk about how the Stargate team consistently does not ask enough questions?
Can we talk about how
Daniel
the Stargate
does.
team does not listen to the people they should be listening to?
Like Daniel, yes, Daniel is out there asking the questions. And I did like the moment in this episode where he was finally told, okay, yeah, no, Daniel, go ask as many questions as you
Yes.
want. I was like, finally.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I hadn't seen this episode in years. I'm doing an Atlantis rewatch right now, and then I'm gonna go back and do SG1, but maybe Babylon 5 first. So we'll see. But I hadn't watched this episode in a long time. And I remember just when you just pick it out of the context as like a single episode,
Oh,
I thought to myself, why is Carter not standing up more on Daniel's side? I was really surprised. And then finally, about halfway through the episode, she's like, wait a second, there's something going on here. Something's weird. And I was like, thank you, Sam. What's going on? But this was a good episode.
this is a really good episode. I really I rewatched it Thursday. I think Thursday.
The only thing I wish that this episode had done a little bit better is I wish that fake Odo and his people had been a little less like heavy-handed, obvious from the beginning. Because from the beginning, I was like, wow, he came on real hard. Like,
Yeah.
that's a little bit suspicious. I wish that they had maybe given us more of like an emotional attachment
Yes,
to
fake
his
Odo.
people, so that we would have been like, oh yeah, I'm on their side. And so that when the twist comes towards the end, that I would have felt more like emotionally gutted by the twist. I mean, I was a little bit gutted because Jack obviously, he murders somebody who murders a couple people without knowing he's murdering people.
Yeah.
But like I kind of also felt like, Jack, you should have seen how these guys were talking. You should have known there was something sus going on.
I mean, you should have listened to Daniel. Okay. You should have listened. Look at the man in his glasses. He knows what he's talking about.
I look at this episode and I just laugh because it was a lot. I watched this when it came out a long time ago. Right?
Yeah.
And I just remember sitting there within the first like 10, 15 minutes. I'm like, ooh, no, these are Nazis. Like,
obviously they're bad guys, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It was so obvious because it like they kept on looking at Teal'c and they said something at like a dinner. And I was like, oh.
Because Teal'c doesn't drink the wine. And he's like, I don't drink alcohol. And they're all looking at him like,
it's not just that.
Right. Yeah.
One of these things isn't like the others. And Daniel picked up on it pretty quick.
Daniel was the hero of this episode.
Yeah.
Like knowing the end, if you go back and rewatch it, you will pick up really quickly that every single character you see there and on the little screens showing their little clones, they're all very, very white. Like,
well, they even bring that up later on because I think Daniel is talking to somebody and he says something about like people looking different or being being of different colors. He said, I think how he explains it to them, and they're like,
ew,
no, what?
No, those
like,
are the enemy. Those are the enemy.
That's the enemy, right?
That's who we're killing.
Daniel was definitely the hero of this episode.
I was very,
and again, sometimes this is a little bit like Battlestar Galactica. Sometimes it's hard to take an episode out of context just randomly because I had to remind myself, okay, we're early enough in the show that the Goa'uld are a major threat, and that's ever present in the back of everybody's mind. But that being said, to me, the response from Jack and the General, it was so like, we're going to do this no matter what, despite the moral or irreprehensible possible connotations to this. We're not going to ask any questions. To me, that was so like, I was like,
we just stop and ask a couple of questions?
We're not going to ask any questions. That to me, that was really hard to accept.
Yeah.
Like I understand they need what they're going to get from these people, but the other time, like, really?
It was a reminder that the goal of the Stargate program is to find weapons to help Earth.
That's true.
And what I loved about this episode is Daniel kept on reminding us, like, at any cost, because we don't know what's going on here. And it just kind of highlights, like, the military is like tunnel vision. Oh my God, these weapons are amazing. They could really help us out. And all they want is water. like this seems like a steal. And I loved that halfway through, Jack realizes, oh, wait, there's something more here. And just finally lets Daniel loose because the systematic racism was so obvious, to Athena's
Yeah.
point in the comment, like so obvious that eventually even Jack, like, oh no.
And the interesting thing here is that they use the cloning as a not as a way to explain this generational racism that's going on, because we're just creating the same person over and over again, and we're keeping them in the same system. They're just learning the same things over and over again. They have no connection with their so-called enemy. They're not learning anything. And then here they come up against people from another world, who only have one person on their team who to them represents a potential enemy. I don't know. I just struggle with Jack and Hammond. I struggle with them in this episode.
I struggle with them in this episode.
And Sam to an extent, although I'll give her a pass because this is early enough in the show that I still feel like her conversations with Jack are still cautious. She still is. She sees the hierarchy. She's not at his level. He's still their commanding officer. Whereas Daniel, obviously, kind of free entity here, feels like he has more right to speak. But still, this is a hard episode to watch and then still have the same appreciation for Jack, particularly, especially when we talk about the next episode we're going to talk about, because I feel like it's a 180. It's a 180 in the character here.
Well, I mean, they're from different seasons. So actually, we're talking about them in out of order because the next episode came first.
Yeah, but
anyways, neither Jack's decisions with these two episodes and how they are in conflict just I'm not sure makes sense for his character. But I also don't like how when he's finally like, oh, this overtly racist culture, it suddenly clicked in my head that these guys are awful. He's just like, okay, pack it up, we're leaving. We're just done. He doesn't try and do anything to like convince them that they're wrong, to help the other side.
No, he just shoots a bunch of them down. Like he just shoots a bunch of them. Like that.
And then he's like, oops. Actually, I'm just gonna leave and let you guys fight it out.
Like, oh, I killed 10 of their guys. I'm gonna kill 10 of your guys, and we're gonna call it even and peace out. Like,
what the fuck?
I don't think MacGyver would have done it that way.
I don't think MacGyver would have done it that way.
The thing about this episode that I found, like, when I was rewatching it, when they called the enemy breeders, and I just stopped.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God.
Because I remember the first time I saw this episode, that's the word that got me. Because I knew something was going on. I was younger. I can't remember. I was young when I saw this.
Yeah.
I knew something suspicious was going on.
Hey,
but the moment they said breeders, it's like your brain is like, oh. What?
Yeah. And it's just, to me, it was funny when Jack realizes that it was overt racism and not because Teal'c was a Jaffa, right?
Right, because that's what you think in the beginning. In the beginning, you're like, oh, it's because Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that was well done. That was well done.
It was well done. That whole reveal was well done.
And I have to say, I think Renee, fake Odo here. He is such a fantastic actor.
He really is. Especially when he has a nose.
I mean, I feel like sometimes when you watch Deep Space Nine, you forget how good he is of an actor because of the lack of a nose, you know. But he is in this role. I mean, he was scary. I mean, it's pretty terrifying.
He's really good. He's a very good actor.
And very believable.
No, he did an amazing job. He was really good in this episode. I don't think that the Stargate team really learned anything from this encounter. I think the viewers might have learned something or had a thought-provoking moment, but I don't think that the actions of Jack or Hammond are changed by this in any way. And I will say that nobody suddenly starts listening to Daniel or letting him ask questions. So I don't feel like the Stargate team themselves like had any lesson from this. But it's such a good episode. It's such a good episode.
It is a good
because
episode.
We start on the side of this new culture that we've encountered. We're
all
going to
do.
help them. We're going to do this. Like
We're the
have
good
these
guys. They're the
allies
good guys.
finally. Like,
Yeah.
and then it's like, oops, sorry. Actually, we should have asked more questions.
Yeah.
JK.
I mean, white saviors in space be white saviors in space, right?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
never a good look. The military is involved, Scott. So the comment is never a good thing when heroes don't learn from their experiences.
This is true.
Caught the
But I
entire
think this
United
is one of
States
the
military
reasons
industrial
why
complex.
this is one of the reasons why I like Stargate, and I like to compare it to things like Star Trek, because they're a little bit more thematically similar. But because Stargate is the characters are military, you get to see these different responses that you wouldn't see in like a Star Trek episode.
True.
Very true.
I mean, I love the fact that these shows all are able to address these topics in such unique ways. And it's necessary. They're all necessary.
Yeah.
Are we going to move on to the
This
next?
is a good episode. We can move on to our next episode, which is also Stargate.
Ooh,
but
I
we're
like
going
this comment.
back 2 seasons to Spirits. I do have some problems with this episode. It is a product of its time. So I think
It
we
is,
should
yes.
state that it is a product of its time.
Absolutely.
I mean,
If
not
it
as
were remade now, it could be done
better.
But Stargate is a product of its time, and it does just take these little snapshots from human history and put them on another planet in like static, like
Yeah.
nothing ever changed about this culture in the
And I-
last 2,000 years.
No,
Except
and
they
I
use
think
it
And we're
metals.
mostly misrepresenting the culture to begin with, so it's fine.
But I think it's interesting to look at this episode also from the perspective not only of the time that it was made, but of the time that we are essentially seeing it from the point of view of the Stargate team, which is Teal'c excluded. It's a white team. They're military, and they're coming from a planet where they believe that they are scientifically and technologically more advanced than the planet they're going to. And so from that perspective, it's really interesting to see that the choices they make are obviously choices of like the product of where they are coming from. I mean, we're supposed to see the indigenous population on this planet as being equal, but it's clear that the characters don't really see them as equal.
So it was interesting because at one point Daniel points out specifically, he's like, it's fascinating because this culture has advanced, but yet they're able to keep their way of life, and he's enthralled by it and like happy to see that they've managed.
Again,
keep
Daniel
their
being the
culture.
only one who's like respectful of what's going on.
Look, early SG1 Daniel.
We're here for the
Love.
Trillium or whatever it's called.
Love Daniel. 100% love Daniel in early SG1.
So do I.
Later Daniel, like
Oh,
when he's all buff.
we're not going there.
That's
Anyway.
a conversation for another
That's a
time.
different
That's a whole
episode.
different
That's a
conversation.
different problem.
But I want to highlight
This is because no one listened to him for so long. That's why that
Correct.
happened. Okay.
And then he decided to be just like the same typical, like horrible. Anyway, this comment I'm highlighting
Oh my God.
because there was
Oh my
a
God.
consultant in Hollywood at the time that consulted and gave professional like opinions on native culture, and he consulted for definitely for Voyager. I'm not sure if he did for SG1, and I come to find out later on that it was a complete fraud and he wasn't native and he made up all this shit. So there's like It's
For the
just
viewers who are
wild.
just listening, the look of shock and awe on my face.
But I mean, it explains why so much of it is so cringe now, because this guy was just going around like, "Hey, I'm an expert in XYZ," and it's like, "No,
Which
you're actually
honestly,
not."
this is my biggest problem with this episode as a viewer in this time and space, is the fact that the indigenous culture on this planet is so like happy, happy, happy. Life is so perfect. Nothing is wrong. Our spirits will protect us. Like, it is such a like I don't know what's the word. What's the word I'm looking for? Like the view is so narrow. It's such a narrow view of what a certain group of people thinks another group of people are like.
Yeah.
It is very difficult to watch because we're trying to say, oh, this cool culture, like we got to save them or respect them or whatever, but they get like one personality trait, which is just like we're just so happy to exist with nature. And I'm like, it reminds me, have you guys watched the show Ghosts, the American version?
Well, I've seen a couple episodes, but not.
Well, we have Flower, who is one of the ghosts who died in I think the 60s or 70s, but like she is just like this burnt out hippie who took way too many drugs, and just like that's in her entire personality, and it works really, really well because there's like this huge ensemble cast, but that's like her one facet that she has is just happy all the time in a completely different world. And watching this, that is what I think about these characters. They're just like super happy to be there all the time in their own little world. And I'm just like,
it also kind of bothers me that the spirits are aliens. Like that the spirits are also taking this culture. Like, I understand that they are there to help and they're trying to live kind of symbiotically with the indigenous people of this planet, but like they're also kind of taking advantage of them in a way. I don't know.
There's just so much about this episode.
But then at the end, Jack's like, oh, you can just be honest with them. It'll be fine. And they're like, oh, yeah.
Oh, can we be honest? Can we be honest?
Oh, yeah.
Can we look like ourselves? I'd rather look like myself, this weird fish person, instead of like a raven and a wolf. Like, girl, get back in your wolf skin.
The wolf is way cooler.
The wolf is way cooler.
But like,
and then of course the aliens also looked kind of white to me.
Yeah, they were all white.
I'm like, oh, the white aliens pretending to be indigenous spirits. Oh.
It's so great. It's so great. Was it Daniel that pointed out that they were kind of like being awful and lying to them and like stealing their culture? I think it was Daniel. It's always Daniel.
But then even at the end of the episode, like, did anybody learn anything?
No.
Like,
no,
there was no consequences. There was no consequences for the action because the aliens are like, okay, here's your people back. And then the indigenous
people back.
Like, okay, thanks. I'm going home. Bye. Like, what?
The US government was still going to come when you guys left for 6 months. So just bury the Stargate. I love that that's their answer to everything. Oh, you don't want us to come back? Just shut your door down. Just shut down how anyone can come talk to you.
So nobody can help you when the Goa'uld show up on your door.
Can I point out that the solution is cut yourself off from the universe?
Yeah.
Because it turns out that even though we're fighting this super evil bad race, we're kind of just the same. Because we're just going to steal your shit when we need it.
Well, I mean, that's how the episode starts. The episode starts with basically they show up and they just try to blow up these people's mountain without saying anything to them. Like, we're just going to blow up the mountain, take all your
we're
stuff.
just going to mine. It's fine. You won't notice anything. Except the massive explosives and the complete, like, clear cutting of your forest.
In fairness, they at first did not think that there were people there because
they didn't look
very hard because they are constantly like, there's no people here, and then they
just
go
send
there
their
and
little
like, oops,
the little thing out.
Actually, there were people here the whole time.
Like,
they just send their little R2D2 through the thing. Yeah, their little R2D2 goes through the gate and is like, I don't see anybody. I just see trees. Okay, go ahead and blow up the mountain. Like.
Have we not already, like, had they not already encountered the Nox at this point? Or no, this is still too early on.
No, this is too early. Yeah. I don't know. This episode made me so mad.
Yeah.
So mad.
Stargate learned nothing. These aliens and their little human pets, because
Which
that's really what they seem to be, is pets, learned nothing except to be bigger isolationists, and cut themselves off even more. So
which
that's good.
it's
That's
interesting
good.
watching these episodes now because like I do know that the episodes get better, right? I mean, we know that the
Right.
episodes get better. Like the final seasons of SG1 are just great. And Atlantis hit it off strong from the beginning. I mean,
I loved
yeah.
Weir. I loved
I
Weir.
loved Weir.
Oh my god. They did her
But
so
yeah,
wrong.
these early episodes of SG1, they don't learn anything. They learn a damn thing going to these
No.
planets. I'm
They're
just
just
like,
like
They're very
look,
slow learners. They're very
colonizers in
well. They have
space.
to unlearn some colonizing before they can learn something new. So
honestly, I feel
might
like
take
they
a while.
don't really learn until some major players kick it. Like until some major players on their team don't make it. And that's when I feel like they start learning, but I don't know.
Oh, that was
Some
sad.
people only learn with really, really hard lessons.
Yeah.
That's an accurate representation of humans. So I'll give them that. I know a couple people that only learn that way. Okay.
I know a country that only learns that way.
I know a
Wasn't gonna
country
say
that
it.
has not learned that lesson despite anything. So sorry. Okay, are we moving? Are we
down to our last episode?
The question is, do we want to talk about our last episode?
We do.
Do we think Joseph can talk about it and not spend 2 hours talking about it?
I'm just overruling you.
We can't spend 2 hours because I have
we may
things I
have to follow up. We may have to follow up.
Let's just see what happens. Let's see.
Okay.
I think that we can definitely circle back to the Dominion War at some point because that's a whole podcast.
That's a whole podcast.
But yes,
so we're going to talk about
Pale Moonlight.
Yeah.
So who else watched it on Paramount and saw Paramount's new feature where like underneath the season, like you have the seasons and then the episodes for that season, and then under that it had like the greatest hits, like I think it was called standout episodes, because like my Paramount switched to that recently, and when I scroll down, this is the first in the list of standout episodes for me, and I was like, oh, I actually like this feature, Paramount. You did one thing right.
Not
like,
merchandise. Not merchandise.
No, not merchandise, not that, but like you did one thing.
We don't even have Paramount Plus in this country, so I had to watch on Netflix. So I did not get this feature.
I'm kind of envious of you, to be honest, because Paramount Plus is a horrible app. But
yeah,
anyway.
but that means
like how it functions.
Yeah, but I don't get any of the new stuff. We don't get Strange New Worlds.
That's so true. Though.
Don't get Lower Decks. We don't get no Lower Decks, no Strange New Worlds. Section 31.
I'm gonna send you a VPN so you can just like log into my like network. Anyway, I did not say that. That is a joke. Paramount Plus. I am not doing that.
We love Paramount Plus.
Love is a strong word that I do not feel like using in this context.
Okay. We're totally off topic already.
In the Pale Moonlight. This is season 6, Deep Space Nine.
I like the structure
what do we think
of this
about this
episode. I like how they set it up as Cisco kind of like talking, like very diary. They do this, I think, in a couple other episodes where the captain is like telling the story. And I like those. And I am also really, really glad that that is not every single episode because I would hate it so much, but to just throw it in every once in a while. Also, can we talk about how amazing Garrick is in this episode?
Yeah,
yes,
this is a standout episode for him. It
is
so good.
Outside of like the prison camp episode.
And the episode with where he's losing it because of his
the
implant
claustrophobia.
Thing. Yeah.
That's season 7. This episode is where I feel like you really get to see a glimpse of what a complete badass he was as an Obsidian Order agent.
Yeah. Yes.
But also like such an asshole.
Oh.
And like I can't help but love him more because of how bad he is. because
See,
he
I
knows
don't know if that I would
exactly.
call him an asshole, though. I feel like he is a realist in this. He is more a realist in this than Cisco is.
Well,
Oh,
he's a
yes.
Cardassian. He is not bothered by petty human values, right?
I
Like,
don't even think it's that he's not bothered by them. I think it's he's been through things that Cisco hasn't, and he understands how Cardassians work and scheme. And so that is just like very different than how humans approach things. So like he's just not doing it
He
from
has a lizard brain.
he has a lizard brain.
I mean,
But-
Garrick is an interesting character because he grew up in an occupying planet where they were the occupiers, and then he was cast out. He was ostracized from the occupying force to
And he
live
goes-
among the occupied people who have now taken back control of their station, of their planet. And so he has an interesting perspective, having been on the bad side and then tried to be on the good side and then falling in the neutral zone, essentially.
But
you guys are welcome to laugh in the comments. I make good jokes, right?
I love that joke.
Relevant to this episode. Romulans.
So relevant. I just he is doing what's right for the greater good, not just of Cardassia, but of the Federation, the Klingon Empire, the entire Alpha Quadrant, including the Romulans, and he knows it.
Yeah.
And so he is able to justify horrible actions because he knows at the end of the day, if he doesn't do this for Cisco will never do it himself.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I was going to say he knows the Federation won't do this. He knows Cisco won't do it. And he knows that if he waits until Cisco says no, then he can't do it. He has to do it before Cisco says anything.
Yeah. And it absolutely plays Cisco and his nature to get to that ultimate goal, right? And in this case, the ultimate goal is a good thing because they are essentially
it was
losing.
Cisco's goal too, really.
It was.
Yeah. And Starfleet blessed the plan, right? So that should take all of the guilt away, supposedly. No, it doesn't.
I mean, honestly, I think that Starfleet, this is the one of the few circumstances in all of Star Trek where I think Starfleet would have been like, Garrick, do it. I think if Garrick had gone above Cisco's head and said to an admiral, should I do this? I think they'd have been like, do it, dude, do it.
I mean, every admiral in Starfleet is kind of horrible, though. So that's not really saying anything good about Garrick's plan.
But like, even if you look at it from the other point of view, like, say it was opposite. Say it was the Romulans. The Romulans would have totally done it.
Yeah,
they would have done it.
Klingons would have done it too, right? Like, there's no other force out there that wouldn't have done it because it needed to be done, and it was for their best interest. It's what to me this highlights the depth of Garrick, but also the depth of Cisco, because Cisco initially came up with a plan to pull in the Romulans by tricking them. So this is just one step beyond that. I feel like Cisco is already in a morally gray area. This is something Picard never would have done. Picard would have sat there like, we are undermining the values of Starfleet. It's like, what good is that when like the Dominion has conquered you? Like, honestly, and then like billions are dying.
That's fair. I think Picard would have tried something very, very different. But also, I think Janeway would have had less qualms with making the decision that Cisco struggled with. I think she would have been like giving Garrick a meaningful look. Like, I know you know how to do this, and I don't. But this, I think because we watch her make a lot of decisions that are not exactly the same, but when she's dealing with the Borg and species random numbers from the other reality that I can never remember the name of because it's just string of numbers. I don't know. She makes some pretty interesting alliances and decisions, and
8472 species.
I mean, it's definitely like the enemy, you know. I mean, they've known the Romulans for centuries. They know what the Romulans are capable of. They know what the Romulans are willing to do and what they're not willing to do. They know the Dominion is just going to come in and wipe everybody out, right?
Yeah.
The Dominion are essentially the Borg here, right? They're just going to come in, they're going to ruin everything. I mean,
and they're not going to stop.
They're not going to stop, you know? And if it comes down to just the Romulans, the Romulans are not going to beat them, you know?
No.
So,
No.
I mean, Sisko was right in that. Garrick was right in that.
I just think it's fascinating that we get Sisko as being the captain faced with this decision, and he is very like, yes, this turned out good, but like I have guilt about this, whereas Picard would have made a different decision. Janeway would have made a different decision.
Admiral Janeway
Kirk would have ended up with his shirt off somehow and then slept with a Romulan spy, probably.
and pulled them into the war.
Yeah, and pulled them into the war.
So at the end,
had to, because now that Romulan spy is pregnant with Kirk's child, and it has to protect the future.
I love how Kirk only thought he had one son. Anyway, anyway, this episode cuts deep because Sisko, like at the last scene, right, where Sisko's sitting there pissed off, and he's talking about, it's like, and the worst part of all of this is, I think I can live with it.
Yeah.
I can live with it.
I love that, like Van said, I loved how they structured this with him talking to the computer. And I've made a video about this on TikTok, which got a lot of like heated criticism from people.
You do like doing those videos.
I do. And where I talked about how when I watched this recently, like when I made that video, I felt like that Sisko was almost like he was bringing us in on this. Like he's like, we're also now implicated in his decision. Because we've seen what he's done, we've seen the choice he's made, and we know we can't unknow what we know, just like he can't. And to me, it felt like way more than just, I'm recording this for posterity on the computer. It felt more like bringing us as the viewer in and making us also culpable for what has happened.
We are all
like breaking the fourth
now.
wall.
Yeah, it felt like a very fourth wall breaking moment to me.
Yeah. I love that perspective, honestly. It's not one that I've had in the past.
No.
But when you say it, it's very obvious, because he couldn't even talk to Dax about this, right? He talks to Dax about everything.
And this is the one episode where he doesn't confide in Dax, and all of his conversations with Dax in this episode are limited to the names of the dead coming up on the manifest.
And in many ways, this is like one of the darkest possible things for him to go through, because he is a moral person and he does deeply believe in doing the right thing, but that the greater good conversation is so relevant in this entire episode. And it just kind of shows like the perfect society, Starfleet and the United Federation of Planets, isn't perfect, and it's built upon this illusion of perfection where you've got these individuals holding on to this guilt for making these decisions that no other major power would leave to just a captain.
Which is why he has to bring Garrick in. This is why he can't confide in Jadzia or Worf or Bashir. He has to use Garrick, because Garrick can also hold on to this and survive. He can't share this with Jadzia, because then not only is he carrying this guilt, she's carrying this guilt, and he's not going to let somebody like her or anybody like his crew carry a guilt of his own responsibility. But Garrick is also responsible, you know, and he's just a simple
tailor.
He can live with it. Garrick can also live with it. I mean, that's the interesting part, is like when at the end of the episode, when he says, I think I can live with it.
Yeah.
We already know Garrick can live with it.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and Garrett pointed it out, like in the scene before that, when they're in the tailor shop and Sisko punches him. He's like, so you'll get what you want. The Romulans will be pulled into the war, and all it cost was the life of one criminal, one Romulan senator, and the self-respect of one Starfleet officer.
Brilliant.
And I mean, that was just like...
The writing is, it's so good. Such a good line. Garrick is the best line.
Obviously, I've watched this a few times.
I love this episode because, like we've kind of brought up before, this is proof that Cisco was the only captain who could have made this choice like this.
Yes.
I agree that I think Janeway would have made this choice too, but I think Janeway would have pulled in some of her bridge officers on this.
Oh yeah.
I think Cisco is the only one who could have pulled this off without involving everybody else.
I mean, she would have put Chakotay in, but he sees things from a different perspective, right? And that's the strength of the Voyager crew, is that half that crew is like, they had already forsaken the Federation at one point because they knew that it was flawed in so many ways. So I think it would have been a totally different episode with Voyager. It's so more impactful because it is Cisco and a Federation crew and a Bajoran crew who probably would not have been okay with manipulating even the Romulans because of what they had just gone through.
That's interesting. I'm not sure.
I don't
I'm
think
not sure how. I'm
I
not
think
sure
Kira
how.
would have. I think Kira would have helped. I think
No.
if it was explained what they were doing, I think she
No.
would have done it.
Because they were using Garrett, and
I mean, she probably wouldn't have wanted to work with him, but the premise of it,
I
where
just feel
we are
like-
just like betraying them, yeah.
I feel
because
like-
she was doing guerrilla warfare, like she was doing all sorts of wild things while Bajor was occupied that were like duplicitous.
maybe, but I don't think it would have been successful.
You think she never did anything like this during the occupation?
I mean,
Okay.
for me, Kira is like, from the beginning to the dire end, it has all been for Bajor. What is best for Bajor? And if it's better for Bajor that the Romulans are in the Dominion War, I think she would do whatever it took to get the Romulans into the Dominion War. Yeah. She wouldn't feel great about it, but I feel like she has personally done worse things.
Yes.
Okay, that's fair.
But
That's
I don't
fair.
know.
I'm convinced.
But
I think she
I don't
is
know.
very
It's such a good
morally correct, but I think, to Marty's point, her core tenet is what is best for Bajor, and that is how she makes all of her decisions. What is best for Bajor? And she would have reached the conclusion that having the Romulans in the war was best. So would she have wanted to work with Garrick? No. Would she have come up with a completely different plan if Cisco had looped her in at all? Probably. But the actual like bones of Garrick's plan, of the line, of the blowing up, of the murder, I don't think that she would have had qualms with it, at least not enough to not do it, because I think she did worse things during the occupation.
It's interesting. I think this is probably why she is not a major player in this episode, because bringing that question in would have been a little too much for the episode. So I think that's probably why we don't see her in this.
Yeah.
Very heavily.
Yeah.
This is a very Cisco Garrick episode and nobody else.
And I love it for that, but it's also like thinking about why wasn't she involved? I think she would have pushed a different plan. I think she would have been more bold and probably would have failed because of it.
Well, I'm not going to say she would have failed, but I think she would have had a different plan for sure.
I think she would have had a different plan. I think she would have come at the Romulans head on.
Yeah.
Because Kira comes at everything head on. And I think the Romulans would have been like, girl,
and that's
maybe your earring is on a little too tight. Like, I think the Romulans would have been like, step off. Like,
and that's why I think she's capable in a lot of ways, but in this situation, without Garrick and like the Cardassian way of doing things, I don't know that it would have worked, because the Romulans are also very sneaky and manipulative. And it really kind of takes somebody just as manipulative to pull them in. And she is just too bold. She's not manipulative. She is like just the Hawk, Kira Smash kind of person.
Yeah.
Which I love about her.
And another reason why she may not have been in this very well, like she might not have been in this, is because of Garrick, honestly. Because if you look at all of Garrick's episodes up until this point, a lot of the manipulation that we've seen on his part when it comes to an individual character has been him manipulating Bashir. And we can see how easily Julian is manipulated by Garrick. This episode is a surprise because we see, Garrick just manipulated Cisco. Like Cisco didn't see it coming. And that's a surprise because at this point we're like, oh yeah, Garrick the spy.
He's a cute little spy Taylor.
But now we see, I mean, he's serious. I mean, this guy's scary.
Good.
This guy's really good. He really was good at his job. He really has been manipulating all of us included, because this whole time we've thought, simple little Taylor, little spy.
Yeah.
And then he does this. And I think that if pulling that wool over Kira's eyes in this episode would have been, I feel like it would have had a different connotation than with it just being Cisco, because I feel like with Cisco, it's a real surprise.
And that's the thing I love about Cisco is, like, from the beginning, he knew that Garrett was dangerous and was there either to spy for Cardassia or had some agenda. And so Cisco was always cautious about him until the Dominion War started. And then he was like, well, this is a necessary evil. And it just, I just love this episode so much. I could keep on going, but I know
we know.
It's a good one.
It's a really good one.
But I mean, at the end of the day, like, I think this was the right decision to make, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Two lives and his self-respect for, like, the billions of lives in the Alpha Quadrant, right?
Including the Romulans, because if the Dominion had conquered the Federation and the Klingons, they would have just swept through Romulus like it was nothing. Because they would have had all of these resources and no qualms about it. So, yes, at the end of the day, it was the right choice. It was the right decision, even though it feels dirty. But sometimes that's what you have to do for the greater good.
So I think after all of these episodes and these discussions, we've probably come to the conclusion that sometimes there is not a 100% good answer. Sometimes we are faced with a problem and there is no, this is correct and this is wrong. Like there's so much gray area. And a lot of these moral decisions were in the end made on what is good for the most people. What, like, very, very glorified trolley problems, everybody's favorite. And you think about a trolley problem and, you know, people got really into it with the memes, what, a year or 2 years ago? They're just everywhere. And a lot of these episodes are that, like, yeah, this is a bad decision that hurts one person, or in the Pale Moonlight, 2 people die, but like the millions of people that we save by making this hard, difficult, morally gray decision, that probably outweighs those 2 lives.
Needs of the many.
So, yeah.
Spock would have been on the Garrick's side.
I think Spock would have. I think it is the logical decision. Unfortunately, it's not the one that makes people feel good and warm and fuzzy inside. Sorry.
I'm going to stop. We're good. We're good.
Joseph's going to stop. Yeah, I think most of our episodes circled back to the needs of the many over the needs of the few.
Or the one.
Or the one.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're done. So.
Yay!
That concludes episode 11. Buck Archer? No.
Sorry.
I died when I saw that. We're so glad you tagged along. Please give us a like and subscribe if you haven't already done that, and share our podcast with your friends. Our next episode will be something. We have not decided on a topic. We are notoriously ADHD, and we have slacked on the next topic.
We're slowly getting into this new year, guys. Slowly getting into it.
Slowly. And
we have lots of ideas. We have lots of ideas. So we'll let you know at some point in the future, but probably not on TikTok. So follow our other social media to stay tuned in. And give us a follow on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening to podcasts, so you get notified when our next episode drops.
And don't forget to like this episode too.
Or argue with us in the comments.
Yes. Thank you. And we're done.
Going out to explore. Julian comes to another fracking podcast. Time travel, wormholes, and more. Chevron's locked on another fracking podcast. Debating all the lore. We get signal of another fracking podcast. Nerdy topics galore. Systems go for another fracking podcast.